Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Season 2 of My Thoughts. For those of you who are new to the series, just to give a quick recap, this is the series where I give my thoughts and we rank the movies in Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Of course, you can go and check out Season 1, where we ranked all of the Disney Plus shows. There's a playlist on my channel, and if you go and look back at my videos, they are the sorted videos, starting with She-Hulk and ending with WandaVision. And today we are continuing on with our rankings of the Phase 4 movies. Now, just to sort of recap where the films have landed that we've talked about so far, the highest film that we've currently discussed is Shang-Chi at the third spot. We have Black Widow at the sixth spot, and we have the Eternals and last place in the seventh spot. And after a sort of critical review last week of the Eternals, I'm sort of excited to move forward and talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. Because Spider-Man No Way Home, I think, without even getting into spoilers of where it's ranked, it is one of the top 3 best films, in my opinion, of this phase. Where it ends up, we're going to find out today, but it's an incredible film, and I'm going to leave it at that, and I'll talk about why it's an incredible film, but it's very, there's a very sharp contrast between the thoughts and opinions of those leaving the Eternals film and the thoughts and opinions of those watching Spider-Man No Way Home. And that's because, in my opinion, and I think arguably, Spider-Man No Way Home was the most hyped movie of Phase 4. And this is because we had heard rumors for years that at some point or another, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were going to make their way into the MCU, and they were going to, find a way to incorporate the Spider-Men that we all grew up with into the modern iteration of the MCU. And I think if it was a magical time to be on websites like Twitter, or if you follow any Marvel fan pages, things like that, seeing just the hype around this film and the hype around the belief, the not even confirmed belief, but just the belief that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield would be returning, it was incredible. There was no better feeling than a fan base who was just all excited about, this potential event happening, even though it wasn't confirmed. And because of that, this movie really did have the most writing on it, in my opinion, out of any other film in Phase 4. And because of that, it also had the biggest chance to disappoint. Because, of course, as soon as you have high expectations, there is a very large chance that you end up disappointing. And again, especially in a film like this, that you're going to have to essentially bridge 3 generations of Spider-Man fans. When I say generations, I don't actually mean generations of people, but generations of fans. You have some who love the original OG Maguire films. You have, I think, less that liked the Garfield films, but there are some very strong supporters of Andrew Garfield who feel that he was the best Spider-Man. And then you have, of course, the modern Tom Holland fans. And so sort of bridging all that gap together, and, on the off chance that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield didn't show up, there was just a lot of expectations riding on this film, and they had to get it right. And that is, what we're going to look at to see if they did. And I'm also going to mention real quick that, I'll save this, actually. I'll save this for the end. But there's a very important point I would like to make, but I think it's better served at the end of the film, or at the end of the video. So, as always, we're going to start off by talking about the characters and, sort of saying my thoughts on where they went in the story and things of that nature. Now, this film's a little weird because there are a lot of characters, so I'm going to clump some characters together and you'll see what I mean, but just wanted to make that point because there are a lot of characters that are important to the story that we have to get through. But first and foremost, let's start with Peter Parker, and specifically Tom Holland's version of Peter Parker. So far in the MCU, prior to this film, Peter Parker had essentially been Iron Man Jr. And I know that there are some people who are going to very much disagree with that characterization of him, but it's true. His suit is practically an Iron Man suit. He had all the Stark AI, all the Stark tech. His last film in the franchise, Far From Home, was pretty much specifically dedicated to fixing a mess created by Tony Stark. And while we do get some development of Peter Parker, we really didn't have a solely, Peter Parker centric story. And this exactly is what No Way Home is at its core. Is we get to see the vulnerable side of Tom Holland's Peter Parker to a degree that we really haven't seen before. They sort of opened up the door a bit in Far From Home, but he wasn't at his lowest. This film, make no mistake about it, is Peter Parker at his lowest. And we get to see how he responds and how he reacts to himself being at his lowest. And I think the culmination of everything that he goes through, from losing his aunt to teaming up with the other Spider-Men to making the ultimate sacrifice play to say everybody will forget who I am, including my best friend and my girlfriend. It shows that Peter Parker, I think, has established himself as a hero in the MCU. I think that beforehand, of course, you could say he was a hero, but this was a Iron Man-like play, but was specifically Peter Parker. Because Iron Man thrived on everybody knowing who he was and being this public figure. And Spider-Man chose to go back to having a relatively normal life and lost everybody in the process. And I think that that is a extremely beneficial character moment that we had not really gotten from this version of Peter Parker yet. And I'm glad they did, and I think that, Spider-Man is a fan favorite hero for a reason, and his sacrifice in this film sort of furthers, this idea that he is really one of Marvel's greatest heroes and one of the MCU's greatest heroes as well. So we talked about clumping characters. This is the first clump I'm going to do. So we're going to talk about MJ and Ned Leeds together, because they are both sort of the side characters of the film, but they play an important role as always. And I think really what needs to be highlighted here is just how effectively the movie sort of develops MJ and Peter's relationship. So it's been building up. We saw it really sort of culminate and begin in Far From Home, but we really see how much MJ and Peter care for each other, and it makes the final sacrifice at the end so much more meaningful because of that. And I mean, it's crazy that I think more people were touched by MJ and Peter's story than Peter and Ned Leeds' story, because the Peter and Ned Leeds story has been built up since the first film, Spider-Man Homecoming, and has really transcended films. I mean, all the way up. I mean, Ned Leeds appeared in Infinity War and Endgame, albeit very minor roles, but he still appeared. And I mean, seeing the chemistry between MJ and Peter, and then seeing the love between Ned and Peter, and seeing it expanded, and quite frankly, I think it's been one of the highlights of this Spider-Man franchise, is the relationship between them two. And again, seeing it crumble down and seeing Peter willing to sacrifice it for the better good of the universe, it's a touching moment, and I really hope that this is not the last we see of MJ and Ned Leeds. I don't think it will be, because again, these are two fantastic actors, and they really gave it all in their performance, even though they were not the main focus of the film. And I respect that so much, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed both their performance. Arguably, they are the best secondary character performances in Phase 4. There's another film I'll talk about that I think could give it a run for its money, but again, overall, just incredible from both of those characters. Doctor Strange is the next character I want to talk about, and he sort of just filled the role of the angry mentor who sort of had to move the plot along by casting a spell that, of course, released all of the villains and the Spider-Men into the modern MCU dimension, I suppose. That's all still sort of willy-nilly as to what exactly happened. I guess universe, whatever. Again, we will get some confirmation as to all this multiverse stuff at some point, but I think a lot of the issues I have with Doctor Strange as a character, specifically when he teams up with other characters, was sort of highlighted here. Because, I mean, Doctor Strange is a very powerful character, and sort of having him on like a street level movie is very difficult because, again, Doctor Strange is extremely powerful and he's a weird character. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but he's a weird character. There's not many characters who have abilities like Doctor Strange. Magic is a weird concept in and of itself. And so I think in that regard, they utilize him perfectly. Again, I hate how he always comes off as angry and I mean, yeah, he's supposed to be arrogant, of course, but he comes off more angry than arrogant at times. And, I just think that that's sort of how the MCU has taken his character. But, I mean, there are bigger issues that could have been had, but they utilized him well. So, well, it's a minor point. Again, I don't like a lot of the characterization of Doctor Strange by the MCU. I still think he's a great character. But in this film, I think he was utilized well. He moved the plot along, and I think he filled the role that he was exactly supposed to fulfill. So I'm going to sort of speed up here because I know that this is taking a bit. But before we get to the villains, I want to quickly touch on Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield because, of course, they were in this film, and it was legendary. I mean, this was, again, something that the entire internet had theorized and had wished for. And Marvel, I mean, they put out a great product with both of them. And instead of making it an easy payday for them, and I'll say this as to every actor that came from the old franchises, they all gave a fantastic performance. We saw Andrew Garfield redeem himself by saving MJ, and then Tobey Maguire really took over as the sort of leader of the Spider-Men. He was the moral guide for our version of Peter Parker. And it was just amazing to watch. Again, that you could tell that both of them really cared about their performance and really cared about playing Peter Parker once again. And instead of making it an easy payday, they both went on the screen. And when they were on the screen as individuals, they were stars. But when all three of them worked together, it just clicked. And you would think that having an actor work with other actors who are playing the same character, that could be an issue, but it really wasn't. They all really bounced off of each other, and I mean, I don't think they could have handled the inclusion of the three Spider-Men any better than they did. So kudos to both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's versions of Spider-Man. They fit perfectly in the story, and their performances were fantastic. So as I said, I'm going to speed this up a little bit because now we're going to talk about the villains. And there are 5 villains. There are really 3 that I want to touch on to I guess, a larger degree. But, there are 5 villains. All of them came from previous Spider-Man films. So let's just hop in. So first is Dr. Octopus. I think that he is arguably the most fleshed out villain. You could argue me on that with the next individual I'm going to talk about. But he keeps his motivations consistent from Spider-Man 2. He's not really a bad guy. He's controlled by his arms. And that really shows in the very end of the film, in the climax. He essentially saves the day. He saves the Spider-Man. And I think that Dr. Octopus is just one of the most likable villains, arguably, in the entirety of the MCU. And I think they just really built on that here. And again, incredible performance from Alfred Molina. Again, could have just come and got a payday, but no, he really gave it his all. And again, Dr. Octopus is, I think, fantastic. I don't know if you could ever make another live action version of Dr. Octopus and have anybody except Alfred Molina play him, because he just is perfect in that role. Next, we're going to talk about Green Goblin, and I don't think this is something that you all probably don't already know, but William Dafoe gave a killer performance. I mean, he is incredible at looking sadistic and insane in this film, to the point where if you watch it, you might believe he actually is, because he gave that convincing of a performance. And you can tell that the film tried to place Green Goblin as the main bad guy. They did an excellent job at it. His performance is excellent. How he moves along the story, how he still battles between, being the Green Goblin and just living his normal life. It's fantastic. There's no other word I can use. It was just an incredible performance overall. And I really hope this is not the last time we get to see the Green Goblin, because just like I said about Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus, William Dafoe is just, I think, the on-screen Green Goblin for the remainder of Spider-Man live-action films, because he's fantastic. So next up is Electro, and he's the only real other character who got major depth. And they made some odd changes to his character. They made him, he was a nerd. Now he's, this muscular, manly character. Sort of odd, but, he was, I think, the most just evil for evil's sake character out of the entire cast that we got. But it was fine. Again, when you have two characters that are as complex as Dr. Octopus and Green Goblin, having just a baddie for baddie's sake isn't necessarily a bad thing. So, again, if he was the main villain, I would have issue with it. But considering he was really the third out of the 5, I think that it was warranted with what they did with this character. And just to quickly mention both Sandman and Lizard, they are both very minor. They're effective in what they end up doing, but they're really looked over. But again, I think that when you have 5 villains like that, you really have to focus on the heavy hitters, and I think they picked the correct 3 to really focus on. And Sandman has a little bit more of a role than Lizard does, but I think both of them, they're effective in the parts that they're in, and I really don't have many complaints about how they handled their inclusion. So to quickly speed through this, because I know, again, this has been a rather long video, I think the best scene of the film was the Statue of Liberty fight. You have the team up with the 3 Spider-Men. You have Doctor Strange coming out. You have Andrew Garfield, Spider-Man, saving MJ. Just overall, some of the most epic fight scenes we've seen in Phase 4. And the very ending with Tobey Maguire stopping Tom Holland from killing Green Goblin was a perfect mentor-mentee sort of shot. It was incredible, and I really enjoyed it. Now, there really weren't any bad scenes. My least favorite scene was the conversation in the Undercroft, where we have William Dafoe give the, I'm something of a scientist myself meme. It seemed very just pandering to the audience. And again, it was funny, but, it was not my favorite scene. And it sort of slowed down the film a bit, but again, very minor. If that was the worst scene in your film, you made a great film. And with that being said, that is exactly why Spider-Man No Way Home is the first ranked film out of Phase 4. I had a very hard time deciding between the top 3, and I really struggled between 1 and 2, but Spider-Man No Way Home, I had to give it to them. They really found a way to pull off the impossible, bringing back the Spider-Man, keeping the fans content, and making a great film. And I will say this is a point I wanted to make earlier, but I think it does need to be said, which is this was a movie that was primarily based on nostalgia. So if you were nostalgic towards these characters, you probably really enjoyed it. And if you really weren't nostalgic, it might have not been the best film for you. And I'm not saying this film doesn't have flaws, it certainly does. But looking at the other films in Phase 4, yes, this film was cameo heavy. But I think every single cameo, even the Daredevil one, made sense, which I could not say for some of the other films, especially the next film we will be talking about next week, but I will save my thoughts on that for then. With that being said, again, Spider-Man No Way Home, best movie out of Phase 4. Now we're going to have to see who takes the number 2, number 4, number 5 spot with the remaining 3 films we have coming up. And next week we'll be talking about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So stay tuned for that. I hope you all have a great rest of the week. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and please feel free to share your thoughts if you agree, disagree. You know, I always love the discussion, always love talking to you guys about your thoughts on the films because I love the MCU and I know all of you do as well. So again, thank you so much for watching. I really enjoy making these videos. I look forward to seeing you all back here next week when we talk about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I will see you all then.